Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. In college, I was living in an old dormitory. It was one of those buildings that had been around for ages, full of creaking floors and strange noises. I shared a room with this guy named Dave. We were both fairly normal students, just trying to get by. One night, about 2 weeks into the semester, I was working late on a paper. Dave had gone to bed early, and the room was completely quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the old radiator. Around midnight, though, I heard a faint tapping noise coming from the window. It was a little odd because the window was old and didn't close properly. The tapping was very rhythmic and consistent. I tried to just ignore it, thinking it was the wind rattling the frame or something, but it just kept on going. Tap, tap, tap. It was starting to get on my nerves, so I went over to the window to check out what was going on. I pulled back the curtain and looked out into the dark courtyard below. There was nothing there. The tapping stopped immediately. As soon as I looked outside, I shrugged it off and went back to my desk. But after about 10 minutes, the tapping started again. This time it seemed to be coming from inside the room. I glanced around but saw nothing unusual. Dave was still asleep, snoring away. The tapping continued sporadically for the next hour or so, starting and stopping without any clear pattern. I tried to focus on my paper, but all the noise was making it hard to concentrate. Finally, I decided to just go to bed and deal with it the next morning. The next day, I asked Dave if he had heard anything strange the night before. He looked at me funny and said no. I thought maybe I was just imagining things, or it was some sort of stress-related issue. It wasn't until a few days later, when it started to get really weird, that I began to question things. That same week, our dorm had a fire drill in the middle of the night. Everyone was groggy and annoyed, but we went outside and stood in the cold while they checked things out. As we were waiting, I noticed that some of the students were talking about a rumor going around. They said our dorm used to be a hospital, and there were stories about it being haunted. Well, I didn't believe in ghosts, but that eerie tapping was really starting to creep me out. A few nights after the fire drill, the tapping came back, this time much more insistent, like someone was trying to get in or something. I was alone in the room that night because Dave had gone out for the evening. The tapping was loud enough now that I could hear it very clearly, even over the hum of the radiator. I went to the window again and saw nothing outside. I looked around the room, checked the closet, checked under the bed, everything seemed perfectly normal. I tried to ignore it, but this incessant tapping just would not stop. It was getting harder to concentrate on anything else, so I decided to call Dave to see if he could come back early. He answered and said he was on his way. While I waited, the tapping grew louder and more frantic. By now, it started to sound like it was coming from within the walls, or maybe even the ceiling itself. I was starting to get really scared. When Dave got back, he said he didn't hear anything unusual. We stayed up for a while, talking and trying to distract ourselves, and the tapping eventually stopped. We went to bed. The next day, I found out that Dave did hear the same thing. He didn't tell me the truth, though, because he thought it would freak me out too much. That night, we both heard the tapping again, but this time it was different. It was more of a scratching, coming from multiple different directions. We just couldn't figure out where this unsettling sound was coming from. It seemed to be from somewhere within the walls, or perhaps the floor, maybe all at once too. We were too scared to sleep, so we stayed up, talking about it, trying to find a logical explanation. After a few more nights of these same unsettling noises, we decided to get some help. We talked to the dorm advisor, but she brushed it off as old building noises. We tried to explain that it wasn't the usual old creaks and groans you'd hear, and she promised to send someone to check it out, but nothing ever changed. The tapping continued for the rest of the semester, driving us crazy. It did seem to get quieter after a while, though, as if whatever was making the noise had gotten tired or something. We never did find out what was causing it. Some of the other students also mentioned hearing similar things, but no one really talked about it much. When the semester ended, Dave and I moved out of the dorm together and into an apartment off campus. The tapping stopped completely. We both agreed that whatever was happening was tied to that old building. Even now, when I think back on it, I still get a chill. I don't know if it was something supernatural or something that was completely explainable, but the fact that nobody could explain it to us and it stopped as soon as we left still makes me uneasy. I often wonder if the next person who moved into that dorm eventually heard the same things. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It's one of those mysteries that will probably never be solved. I'll always remember, though, those nights with the strange noises keeping me awake. Last semester at college, I had a scary encounter in the library of all places. It was toward the end of the semester, only about 2 weeks left of school before finals. I was getting hit hard with assignments and tests that I really needed to study for. Normally, I would do my assignments at home in my room, but the stuff I needed to complete was really piling up. Recently, I had started going to the campus library to do all my studying and homework. I had gone quite a few times now and gotten into a groove of going a few nights every week and staying for most of the night. It was actually quite nice. The way the library was set up, the first floor looked like your classic library with tons of bookshelves and books. However, the second floor was just a maze of hallways, really, with a bunch of side rooms that students could rent out and study in. All the rooms would be locked, but all I had to do was show my student ID at the front desk, and I'd receive a key and get a study room all to myself. On this particular Wednesday night, I got myself a room key and went upstairs to find my room number. I walked throughout the various hallways looking for my room and eventually found it toward the back of the second floor. I got my laptop and everything else I needed set up and then went to work. I had been working away on homework for many hours now, and it was almost 10 p.m. The library closed at 11, so I knew I still had a bit of time to do a little bit more work. The only thing was I needed a small bathroom break. First, I made my way down the hallways toward the bathroom that was on the second floor. When I arrived at the library earlier, some of the other study rooms had been filled with other students studying, but now they were all empty and dark. It appeared that I was the only one left, at least on this floor of the library. I finished with my bathroom break quite quickly and made my way back toward my study room. When I turned the corner and saw my study room, though, something was immediately wrong. I had left the door open and unlocked because I was only going to use the bathroom and didn't want to bring the key with me. That wasn't out of the ordinary. However, when I had left, I had definitely left the light on. Through the window, I could see that all the lights were now off in the study room, and it was filled with darkness. I stood outside the door to the room, wondering what to do next. I had most definitely left the light on, but perhaps there were some motion sensors or something, and it had turned off by itself. I wasn't really sure if we had something like that. I cautiously poked my head into the room and fumbled for the light switch on the wall. I finally found it and flicked it on, illuminating the room with light once more. I scanned around to see if anyone was in there, but it appeared to be empty. I looked at my personal items, and nothing appeared to have been stolen or tampered with either. The only thing I saw that was different from before was on the back wall, written on the whiteboard with a dry erase marker. It was 2 words, "Watch you." I got chills as I read that. Going over to lock the door to the room, I looked through the window out into the hallway and at the other study rooms nearby to see if anyone was there. I barely knew how to comprehend what I'd just seen. Had somebody been watching me while in the library or watching me outside of the library as well? Regardless, I was now extremely nervous. I wanted to pack up and go home for the night. I normally walked from my house to the library, but there was no way I was doing that tonight. I called the campus safety officers and asked if I could get a ride home. For the final 2 weeks of the semester, I did not study at the library at all and was always looking over my shoulder. I never noticed anyone who seemed to be watching me, and I didn't have any more encounters like that over the last 2 weeks that I was at school. I never really thought much of getting randomly paired with a college roommate. I figured we'd be friendly, share some laughs, and maybe argue over a few small things, but nothing really out of the ordinary. When I moved into the dorm, though, I was paired with a girl named Emily, and from the very start, things felt off. Emily was very quiet, but not in a shy and reserved way, in a way that made you wonder if she might have something to hide. She didn't go out much at all, and when she did, she'd be back in no time. She kept to herself and refused to speak to me. I tried to be friendly, but she would only give one-word answers. Over time, I started to avoid her as much as possible. I did feel a bit bad about that, but it was just easier that way. One evening, I was studying in the room when Emily came in, looking much more upset than usual. She threw her bag onto the bed and sat down quite heavily. I tried to ignore her, but she began pacing back and forth. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, even though I didn't really expect an answer. She replied immediately, "Yeah. Just got a lot on my mind." She immediately fell silent again. That night, I was about to fall asleep when I heard Emily's bed begin creaking. I looked at the clock, and it was past 2 a.m. I tried to ignore it, thinking she was just restless. Then I heard a soft, rhythmic thumping sound. It was irregular, like something heavy being moved around. Curiosity got the better of me. I got up and peeked out of my bed. Emily's bed was moving with each thump, and I could see her silhouette through the thin partition that separated our beds. She was sitting up with her head bent forward, but I was too tired to investigate further. I just went back to bed. The next morning, Emily was already gone when I woke up. I didn't think much of it until the day after. I was sitting at my desk when I noticed something odd. The drawer of the nightstand next to Emily's bed was slightly open, which it basically never was. I could see a piece of paper sticking out of it, so I pulled it out. On it was a list of names and dates written in Emily's handwriting. It didn't make sense at first, but then I realized they were the names of students in our dorm, and the dates were all recent as well. I started to feel a bit uneasy. I didn't know why Emily would have a list like this, and I didn't exactly want to confront her about it. A few days later, the list had disappeared, and Emily was acting like nothing had ever happened. As the days went on, she started acting even weirder than normal. I started noticing that she would always be home, even when she said she would be going out. I had come back from class, and her door would be closed, but I could hear these muffled noises coming from inside. It sounded like she was talking or maybe arguing with someone, but I had never seen anyone else come or go. One night, after several days of this behavior, I was coming back from a late-night study session. As I approached our room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I could hear Emily's voice, but this time it was much more clear. She was talking loudly and angrily, and her door was cracked open. I could see her in the room, standing by the window with her back to me. She was talking to herself, but the way she was moving and reacting, it was like she was addressing someone else. I couldn't make out what exactly the conversation was about, but it sounded very intense. I didn't want to intrude, so I quietly closed the door and went into the common area. The next morning, Emily was gone again. I took the opportunity to look around her space. I felt a little bit guilty about snooping, but she was acting so weird lately that I wanted to see if I could get a clue as to what was going on. I didn't find much, just a few personal items in the empty drawer where the list had been. But there was something else underneath her bed. It was this small, old-fashioned key that didn't look like it belonged to any of the dorm rooms. I put it back where I found it and decided to just stay away from her side of the room. The days continued to go by, and her behavior grew more and more strange and erratic. One evening, I was studying late, and I saw her from the corner of my eye, walking around the room with this strange, intense look on her face. She had a heavy bag with her and seemed to be looking for something. I tried to avoid her, but she noticed me and gave me the angriest glare before quickly disappearing down the hallway. Things reached a tipping point one night. I was awoken by a loud banging sound coming from her side of the room. I hesitated but decided to check it out. When I opened the door to the room, it was completely dark, and Emily was nowhere to be seen. Her bed was a complete mess, and her room looked like it had been ransacked. I went to the common area, where I saw Emily sitting alone in the darkness, holding her head in her hands and rocking back and forth. She looked up when I approached and had bloodshot eyes with tears flowing freely. "Are you all right? What's going on?" I wanted to try and be supportive, despite my apprehension about how she was behaving. She nodded but didn't say anything, and I decided I shouldn't press any further. The next day, Emily disappeared. Her things were all gone when I woke up, and a simple note had been left on her desk saying she was going away and would not be coming back ever again. I never did see her again either. I found out she transferred out. I still don't know what was going on with her, but the whole experience left me shaken. I learned to be careful about who I live with. I wonder if I'll ever know the real story behind her strange behavior and that weird list of names. Everything about the girl just seemed very strange and mysterious. I live by myself in a 2-story home. It's not that big, but it's enough space for me, and I've lived here for about 5 years now. Something really crazy happened last year. I worked pretty late one night, and after getting home, I went inside my house and was planning to go straight to bed. I went down the hallway, took a quick shower, and went to my bedroom. It was right after I got inside my bedroom that I thought I could hear the sound of a door opening somewhere downstairs. Now, obviously, I was home alone, so I didn't know what that could be. I hadn't heard it that clearly, so I stopped what I was doing and listened in. I thought I could now hear footsteps, but I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from or where they were going. I also didn't know which door inside of my home I had just heard opening. It clearly was not the front door, though, because it sounded like it was somewhere downstairs. As I stood there just inside of my bedroom, listening in, the noises quieted down, and I no longer heard footsteps or anybody walking or anything. I was still pretty freaked out about it, though. After about a minute or two, I still hadn't heard anything, so I got up the courage to investigate. Most of the lights inside my home were already off, so I left my bedroom and headed downstairs in the darkness. As I went, I turned on just about every light, going into one room at a time. I was really nervous. I didn't know what exactly to expect. Each room that I entered, though, I didn't see any signs of anyone inside. Eventually, I'd made it around all the rooms on the main level of my home. I was now very confused, but also relieved that I didn't find anyone. I thought that maybe I'd just been hearing things, or perhaps imagining the noises. Still, they seemed awfully real when I'd heard them. I went around and turned all the lights back out. I was finally going to go back to bed when I got to the staircase and was about to go up. Then, though, I heard another noise. It was the sound of a door opening, except this time, I could tell it was the door leading to the basement. I hadn't checked the basement at all when looking through my home. I realized someone must have been down there. From where I was, I could not see the door to the basement clearly and quickly started going upstairs to get to my bedroom. As I was doing this, I could hear footsteps moving on the main level, heading in my direction. I reached the top of the stairs and ran to my bedroom. As I was going inside, I heard whoever was behind me starting to run up the stairs. Now, I was extremely nervous. I locked my bedroom door behind me and went for my cell phone to dial 911. As I was doing this, the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I told the 911 dispatcher that there was an intruder in my home. I gave them my address. Meanwhile, the footsteps got closer and closer to my room, and the person tried to open my door. Obviously, it did not open because it was locked. After trying that door, the person seemed to go across the hallway to another room. I stayed inside my bedroom and feared that the person might try anything to get into my room again. I heard the footsteps moving back down the hallway less than a minute later, and then I heard them retreating downstairs. Whoever was there seemed to have gone back down. After that, I really didn't hear anything else. When the police got there, I finally left my bedroom. They came inside and searched the entire property, including the basement, but they didn't find anyone. They also searched outside, but came up empty there as well. They did notice that my back door was unlocked. Whoever had been there had left out the back door. I never saw what they looked like, and I have no clue how they got in. Perhaps I'd forgotten to lock the back door to my house, and that's how they got inside. I can't really be sure, though. They must have been hiding somewhere in my basement the entire time. It just really creeps me out, knowing they tried entering my bedroom, knowing that I was in there. The person never came back, as far as I'm aware. My family has always loved to go on a lot of hikes. Now that my siblings and I are a little older, we don't go quite as often, but every now and then, we still get together for a fun family hike. On a weekend, this particular Saturday, we had gone out as a family to hike a smaller mountain trail. The trail would take us to a nice view of a little waterfall in the river area. The hike was great, and at the top, we stopped to eat lunch, having some sandwiches and other items we had packed. We spent some time swimming in the cool river. Then, as evening approached, we began to make our way back down the mountain to the parking lot area. As we got close to the end of our hike, however, our dad abruptly stopped us and pointed down the mountain from where we were on the trail. Even though it was a good 10-minute walk down, we could see the parking lot from our vantage point. At that time, our car was the only one in the parking lot, but in the distance, it was clear to see that someone was circling our vehicle over and over. We stopped walking down the trail and just watched them as they looked through all the windows of the car. They then pulled on all the doors to see if they were unlocked. Finally, we watched in horror as the person climbed into the bed of the truck and pulled the top cover over them to conceal themselves. This seemed to really make my dad angry. He called 911, and we quickly descended the rest of the trail. As we got close to the bottom, but still a good distance away from our vehicle, my dad began yelling to get the attention of whoever was in the back of our truck. My dad yelled several expletives and said to get out of our truck and leave or else. The person hopped out of the back bed. We were close enough now to see it was a man. He walked around our truck one last time, slashing all 4 tires, then slowly walked away. He began to just kind of wander around the parking lot area, eventually disappearing into the trees, sometimes emerging again and randomly wandering around. We couldn't leave now because, obviously, he'd slashed all the tires. We tried to stay as far away from this man as possible, staying at the other edge of the parking lot, across from wherever he was. Eventually, the cops showed up and detained the guy. We found out the guy had been doing antics like this before in different spots around the area. Other hikers' cars had been messed with, and the tires slashed as well. It was a scary end to our hike, but it felt good to know the man was caught and wouldn't be able to harm any other hikers. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.